you have to bring privacy to the user in a way that doesn't infringe on their existing user experience. We're building out an entire on-chain identity. Privacy is not just about like a user's transactions.
Right.
It can extend beyond that and really focus on the types of applications that can be developed in the space as well.
Hello everyone, this is Meina, your crypto friend. Today, I'm really thrilled to have Kenny Lee as my guest. Kenny Lee is the co-founder of Manta Network, a leading privacy project in the Web3 space. Kenny is a tech entrepreneur. He started his first company in the cloud computing space. He joined the blockchain space through Bitcoin mining, has since built various projects, and contributed to thought leadership and content. He received his MBA from MIT Sloan in 2020. In his free time, Kenny enjoys spending time with his dog and exercising. Let's welcome Kenny. Welcome to my channel, Kenny.
Thanks for having me.
What? Why?
Thanks for having me.
And before I start the interview with the founders or the investors, I always do a shot of tea with them.
Okay.
And today, I don't remember what tea it is, but it's pretty sweet.
Great. I love
Cheers.
sweet tea. Thank you. Cheers. I'm from Tennessee, and so in the South, we specialize in sweet tea, iced sweet tea. And the way that they make it is they boil the tea, and then they put as much sugar as they can, because once the water boils, you can actually add more sugar than normal temperature water.
Oh, wow.
So then once it cools down, the sweet tea is extra sweet. And you can't really find it in Boston or New York because people are very health conscious here.
Are you missing that?
Sometimes, yeah. This reminds me of that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I can ship a
It's okay.
a box of the tea to you.
I'm too health conscious now too, so.
Got it. Thank you for the tea. Listen.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to me about my culture.
Tennessee sweet tea culture.
Yes.
And can you please provide a brief introduction to yourself as well as Manta Network?
Yeah, sure. I started my first company in the cloud computing space, like you mentioned, in 2011. And at that time, everyone was saying, cloud is a bubble, it's not sustainable, it's going to crash, no one's going to use it. So I've seen a lot of sort of this technology shaping out from, infancy and how it evolves over time. Saw it in the AI space as well. But yeah, my first company was in cloud computing in 2011, and that actually got me into Bitcoin mining, because what ended up happening was I would have a lot of these servers for the cloud computing company, and the servers have to be on whether I use the servers or not for any sort of clients.
Right.
And so the question now became, how do I cover the cost of those servers that I have to keep running? And so I looked into, various different solutions and learned about Bitcoin mining, started running a few miners on my the idle servers, and so that's how I was kind of covering operational costs. But that also got me into crypto. And so from there, did a couple of projects, worked with a few friends on the world's first Bitcoin options trading platform that never got to market because it was very early for its time.
Right.
And we couldn't get the right regulatory licenses, but it was a great learning experience. And then fast forward to 2017, right, with the ICO boom and a lot of trading activity and interest growing in the crypto space, I started writing content because I had a lot of people just kind of come to me and ask me about crypto, and I found that I was answering the same questions over and over again.
Right.
So I just figured, why not just answer them all at once? And so I started writing about it. Then in 2018, I decided to go to business school. So I went to MIT, and that's where I was the teaching assistant for all the blockchain courses. I was actually, it was all under Gary Gensler at the time, who's now the chairman of the SEC. And so it was great to, learn from him. He was my mentor. I think I have a lot of respect for the way that he works and the way that he thinks. He's a very critical thinker. But overall, he's a very lighthearted, kind person. So, great personality with a great brain. But yeah, so with that, that's where I kind of met my co-founders, so Victor and Shumo. So Victor, he was studying for his master's in econ at the time, and he had cross-registered for some courses over at MIT, specifically the blockchain courses, and so that's how we met. And then Shumo, he was working for Algorand at the time, which was spun out of MIT.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, what is Manta Network? We're building privacy for Web3, and so I believe that it is a huge unsolved problem. A lot of projects are tackling it, right? We all have different solutions, different approaches, different strategies ultimately, but I think the focus for Manta Network is specifically on trying to abstract away the complexity of privacy. So our goal, if you think of it as an analogy, right, is like, you go into a restaurant, you ask for a glass of water, and the restaurant gives you a glass of water.
Yep.
You don't know where the water came from. You don't know if it came from the sink. You don't know if they poured it out of a bottle. Even if it came from the sink, you don't know where the water supply came from, right? Where is its origination point? You don't know. You don't care. You have a glass of water in front of you, and that's what you wanted. It's the same for privacy for us, right? I think like in order for creating some level of universal adoption, you have to bring privacy to the user in a way that doesn't infringe on their existing user experience. So being able to use the same applications without having to think about, oh, now I have to take this extra step into privacy, that's what we're trying to eliminate. So that people can use their existing applications, and not have to think about it, but the privacy is always there.
Got it. So it sounds like you enter the crypto space, or you start to acquire the knowledge about crypto so early. And I actually want to hear, like, after you been observing different cycles in the crypto, in the blockchain space, and after you have been teaching, trying to educating people, but why does it matter? Why does privacy matter to Web3 companies or projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And when you think about like Bitcoin and how it sort of evolved, blockchain in general, right? We rewind back to 2008. Bitcoin started, and it was just sort of a digital currency that was launched on like the dark areas of the internet with a very small community, right?
Yep.
And so like the solution to privacy back then was your wallet address, because your wallet address, it doesn't identify you. You can generate one whenever you wanted to, and the community was small enough where it didn't even matter for people outside of the community to care too much about Bitcoin. But when you fast forward to 2017, right, with ICOs, and then you fast forward to 2021 with like use cases in DeFi and NFT collections, you're starting to see that the nature of on-chain data is no longer about, me transacting, I don't know, some amount of Bitcoin to you to buy a coffee or something. It's now about what applications am I interacting with? What tokens am I holding? What events am I going to, right? Like what NFTs, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, we're building out an entire on-chain identity. You can think of it almost like Facebook, where on Facebook you can sign in with Facebook on different applications, and Facebook knows exactly what you're doing, and they track you, and they tailor their advertisement to you. For Web3, it's the same way. Now that you're connecting to these applications, you're signing them, you're interacting with them, anyone can see that data. And so that becomes a huge problem, because as we think about where blockchain is headed 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as more use cases enter the space and we start really building our identities on chain, without any layer of privacy, right, it becomes a really critical issue of who has access to your data, what they can do with your data, and how they can use that to exploit you as an individual.
But I think the whole point or the whole technology of blockchain is because all the transactions are open to the public. It provides transparency, and also it's secure. Maybe the users, when they are using the blockchain technology, they know people are gonna get their information, and it's actually good for some of the companies to cater to the user behaviors based on their preference. Like, for example, if I use some kind of social apps on the blockchain, right? If I purchase NFTs, maybe I want the platform, whatever I'm using, to cater to my preference and recommending the contents that I like, instead of just protecting my privacy. I mean, I know I have an on-chain identity, but people, they don't know who exactly I am. I'm just a portfolio or a profile. on the internet. And that on-chain identity maybe is a blockchain version of me. It's another identity, right?
To a degree. So there's a few things to consider here. One is, like the idea that the whole point of blockchain is to be transparent. I think that does miss the point, because I think the point of blockchain, especially in relation to Web3, is not about transparency. It's about empowering the individual. We're taking power and authority away from some centralized entity and spreading it equally across all of the community. And so, I guess the theme here is no longer about like what blockchain is about in terms of like enforcing transparency, but more so about like what can you do to empower the user? Because ultimately, like if you want to bring that sort of democratic environment to the user, then you have to give the user choice. And I think privacy definitely needs to be a choice also. Especially with like your NFT example, right? Like, yeah, sure, some people, especially if you buy like one of the, really fancy NFTs that everyone, has some sort of, understands that there's some sort of reputation involved with it, maybe you do want that to be public. But there are other instances where you may not want it to be public, right? And so like having that optionality of privacy, I think, is extremely important. There's a fallacy regarding your online identity, though, because there's two concerns with online identity that kind of arises from the assumption that you're safe because it's a wallet address. One is that you can be doxxed at any time, so anyone can identify you at any point in time. And two is that blockchains are immutable, so they don't change.
Right.
So even if you feel like you're safe today, do you feel like you'll still be safe and anonymous 10 years from now? And if you're not, then whenever you get identified between now and 10 years, people can see exactly what you did today. And so that becomes an issue in terms of your privacy also, right? Because we've all done things on the internet that we regret, right? Like when you're 10 and you're posting on the internet, you're probably not going to be posting the same kind of things when you're 20 or 25 or 30, right? And so like, do you really want all the regrettable stuff completely linked publicly to you? And how does that impact your life, not just in like a personal way, but a professional way?
Right.
How will health insurance companies view you? How will your employers view you? How will your government view you? How will your government's enemies view you? Right? Like there's a lot of security issues and concerns about how it affects your everyday life if there isn't any sort of privacy. And just to kind of give a counterexample, once you are identified, and we are talking about crypto 5-10 years from now,
right,
you go to a coffee shop and you buy a coffee. That coffee transaction shows up on chain. Now, someone else who is monitoring your wallet activity sees that you bought a coffee from this Starbucks in this location.
Somewhere. Yeah. Oh, okay.
And so they look through your transaction history and they notice that every day at around 8:30 a.m. you go to this Starbucks and you buy a coffee. And so if they wanted to come find you, they would know exactly where to look.
Right. Yeah. I see your point. Essentially, it's a choice that the users should have on the blockchain,
definitely.
Whether they want to publicize that information or not. Now that we talk about the importance of the privacy to blockchain, can you please elaborate on what are the key areas or what are the most important areas that needs privacy? For example, is it NFT, DeFi, gaming, on-chain voting, or anything else?
Yeah. I think all the use cases that you just described definitely benefit or derive some sort of value from privacy. For example, on the gaming side, right? Like with on-chain games right now, because the state of every single game, if you put it fully on-chain, would be publicly viewable to anyone, then you can only create certain types of games. For example, you can't create a strategy game. So for people who are familiar with like something as simple as poker or League of Legends, StarCraft, Age of Empires, right? These are all strategy games where every single player on the map, every single player that is, in the game, has their own specific strategy and they can't see what each other are doing. And so we can describe this as like a fog of war.
Right.
But without that layer of privacy, then you can't really have fog of war because anyone can check the state of the game on chain. And so now all the strategies are fully revealed. And so such a game like StarCraft or League of Legends, etc., can't really exist.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's a great example of like how gaming can even benefit from privacy, right? Not just, I think this brings up a really good point. And so I'm glad you brought up the question, because privacy is not just about like a user's transactions.
Right.
It can extend beyond that and really focus on the types of applications that can be developed in the space as well.
I guess the reason why people aren't realizing that is because a lot of those Web3 games, they're essentially very centralized. The servers, the data, but essentially if the skill or the games, they are moving towards more of the decentralized direction, then they will start to realize how important the technology for privacy is for them.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I like to think about like, what is, not what blockchain looks like today, but what does it look like, 5 to 10 years from now?
Now, till today, you have already worked on Manta Network for 3 years. Over the last 3 years, we have already seen a very bull market, and now it's kind of bearish or whatever you call it, crap. So do you think like for the next upcoming bull market, or within what kind of time frame do you think the adoption of the privacy technology will become flourished to a point that you will say, oh, the technology of Manta Network is really being used critically by users and by projects?
Yeah, I think I can't give an exact timeline on this, but it's not just about Manta Network, but about the privacy space in general. I think during this time, right, during this recent bull cycle, a lot of projects, Manta Network, Aztec, Aleo, et cetera, a lot of projects that are focused on privacy really started to, build and iterate on this space.
Yeah.
And so I do think that we're all positioning ourselves to a point where, once we hit the next sort of bull cycle potentially, right, like we're at a great position to launch and really push that whole privacy narrative. I think one of the major barriers to privacy, which is why I really appreciate you having me on this podcast, is education and understanding of privacy, right? Like I think the normal conversation around on-chain privacy is very similar to how the conversation around Bitcoin was years ago, which is essentially, oh, you only use Bitcoin if you're going to do bad things, right? But now we see Bitcoin has evolved to, a level where even institutional funds are trying to figure out their strategies around it. Right. It's really legitimized. And I think privacy is kind of in that infancy in conversation as well, right? Where it's like, oh, you're only going to use privacy if you do bad things. But I think throughout this conversation, we've been highlighting a lot of examples and use cases and like the necessity of it in the Web3 ecosystem. Yeah. And so, I think like in the next sort of cycle, I'm very excited for us, for a lot of other privacy projects to launch and really take that sort of privacy setting and conversation to the next level.
So it sounds like this will be a common effort, a collaborated effort for all those privacy service providers or technology providers.
Yeah. I think, like I said, at Manta Network, we have a specific approach about how we think privacy needs to be delivered, and other projects have their own sort of approaches too. But I think one of the things that we do really well as like an ecosystem is that we are finding lots of ways to cooperate with each other, because at the end of the day, we all have very similar problems. Right. And so, for example, for zero-knowledge proofs, one of the common problems for zero-knowledge proofs is that they're very computationally intensive. It takes your processor a lot of time to create a zero-knowledge proof, and that affects user experience. And so, instead of each of us individually trying to solve the problem ourselves, we should come together and try to solve this problem collectively. And so that's exactly what we're doing. So we have an initiative with lots of other ZK-focused privacy projects called Z-Prize. This is with, Meina, Aleo, Ethereum Foundation, Polkadot, et cetera. And we're all trying to kind of solve the bottlenecks from the technology side for zero-knowledge proofs to scale.
Got it. Yeah. let's talk about the technology or technical details during the later part of the podcast. I have prepared several questions regarding that. And now, since you mentioned like users always have the concerns, even though maybe this is a naive question, but they are concerning about if you allow more privacy or people has the option to be very private on blockchain, right? Then a lot of those criminals, they will be using the technology to conduct crimes to their advantage. And what are your takes on those issues?
Yeah, so two parts. The first one is more focused on a fallacy, and the second one is more focused on, how does the regulatory landscape need to evolve to accommodate for like a true Web3 environment. So the first part about the fallacy is that you can say that about anything, right? I mean, people invented the hammer. People have killed people with hammers, right? Like, if there's a crime to be committed, people will find ways to commit the crime, right? And so it's not like, there's no crime in the world and then we introduce a privacy solution and then all of a sudden crime emerges in the world and crime already exists, right? Like there's already sort of like tools that people use. Right now it's all cash, right? And so the question is, should cash exist? Well, it does, right? And governments are pro-cash, so... But the question is, and this leads into the second part of like the regulatory side. Like, how do you address this in a self-sovereign way? Because, we have to think about it from the idea that we're not like a traditional company. It's not like it's not like the core contributors like myself have any additional access to any sort of, I guess, administrative access privileges than anyone else.
Right.
We're just as, powerful and powerless as every other user on our ecosystem. And so how do we collectively as a community kind of address this in the most self-sovereign way possible? There's a lot of tools being developed these days. And so one of them, for example, is a viewing key. So a viewing key allows, the way a viewing key works is you have a private address.
Right.
And you do all your private transactions, but then let's say, for example, you want to report your taxes at the end of the year to the IRS. And so you say, I did this many transactions, made this much money, et cetera, et cetera. The IRS comes back and says, okay, well, we need you to prove this. You can give the IRS a viewing key, and that viewing key allows the IRS to see all of your private transactions. That allows the individual to decide whether or not
to provide the viewing key to the authoritative party when needed. Or
not even authorities, anyone, right? Like you can provide your viewing key to anyone you want. So like there are definitely approaches where we're thinking about how to still provide some level of compliance and the regulatory aspects in the most adaptable way possible for like a true Web3 environment.
Yeah, I think regulation or compliance is an inevitable issue, or at least it's something need to be tackled by the whole Web3 industry. And it never hurts for founders or investors to be thinking about the issues, like how we can build the whole blockchain ecosystem together with better I'm not saying better regulation because that sounds very bad, but a proper way.
Adaptive regulation, right? Like you think, I agree, you have to think about the regulatory side because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone wants, or a very minority amount of people want to build tools for criminals. Everyone else wants to build tools that can enhance value for people. Right.
To improve efficiency, to add on values to the real world use cases. We can't just live in our utopia. And then I also want to hear you take another topic, but I think we already addressed it a little bit because we already said like privacy is a common topic for a lot of those Web3 companies. Vitalik once said only a global anonymous set is truly reliable and secure. What do you think about that? How do you plan to obtain greater adoption of the privacy technology stack, like globally?
Yeah, so global adoption, I think the previous approaches for privacy to global adoption have been very focused on the user. And I think that's a very challenging way to go about this. It's very challenging to go directly to the user because it requires the user to think about privacy, which is something that people don't actually really think about.
Right.
Because the way that we've been conditioned in Web 2 have made it such that we don't really need to think too much about privacy. We just click I accept and then sign in. And so it's very hard to change a user experience, especially if they have to go through extra steps. Their thought process is essentially, do I want to go to these extra steps and get privacy, or do I just want to get my thing done?
Yeah.
Usually people just want to get their thing done, right? And so
how do you create the need for privacy?
Yeah, so we don't target the individual. We target the application layer. And so right now what we're doing is, Manta and its current deployment is specifically focused within the Polkadot ecosystem. And so this means that we connect with other parachains, which are just other projects within the Polkadot ecosystem.
Yep.
And we enable privacy for those projects. And so those projects can then deliver that privacy to their users.
Right.
And so it's not like us going to each individual user, but instead just focusing specifically on the application level. And that application level then sends that value down to the user. And so it's like instead of hitting one person at a time, we can hit thousands of people at a time.
It's almost like you're giving the user the choice on different applications without them even realizing it.
Yes.
And then once they get used to it, maybe they will realize it is important.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the idea of choice because this is something that we've been working on. So we're working with some partners who are specifically wallets, and what we want to do is instead of saying, hey, if you want privacy, go to Manta Network's application or something like that, right? Like that's that extra step we don't want. Instead, you put that toggle button directly into the wallet and you can just turn on and off privacy for your assets individually, right? Like it eliminates so many steps for the user, and everyone uses wallets to interact with Web3 applications.
So it is like a seamless integration.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I like your idea of constantly talking about choice, because I guess choice always matters to human beings, like the choice of whether you want to do something, how you want to spend the time, right? And then now it's whether you want to keep your privacy for specific components of your life.
Yeah, and I think choice, it's tricky because when you say choice, it's a very broad term, but if you give a user a choice to adopt privacy into their lives, the answer, I would say, more likely than not is no, because they don't want to go through the extra steps. But if you give users the choice to just by default turn on and off privacy without having to, do any sort of other additional interactions, then I think, we can definitely start shifting the mindset towards more of a Web3 self-sovereign, responsible internet identity mindset. And so, in other words, yes.
Yeah. One side is important for the users to get used to those technology. The other side is going back to what we just talked about, educating the users. Because essentially, I think a deeper understanding of why privacy matters to the users will help the product to get mass adoption. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about how you guys prioritize the functionality or the characteristics of your technology stack. So usually people will talk about the product's performance, usability, scalability, and privacy. How do you prioritize all those different characters?
Yeah, it's tricky to say because they're all part of our whole product, and so
yes.
Ultimately, privacy is important to us, but it is at the fundamental level of exactly what we're building. So that's the base layer. And then everything else from there stems around the performance and the usability. So I'll give you an example, right? Like in December of, I guess last year, 2021, we released the first version of our testnet. And so in this version of the testnet, this was just, within our own little community, just to make sure that we can get as much feedback to iterate as possible. the prover speed, or I guess let's get a little higher level instead of that. The speed to transact with privacy on our testnet back in December took anywhere between like 25 to 50 seconds. This includes like generating the zero-knowledge proof, writing it on chain, and everything. And so since then, we released version 2 of our testnet, and that version is something that we've been working on for half a year, and that has been specifically focused on the performance and scalability side. And so the version 2 of the testnet, the transactions can happen within 2 to 10 seconds.
Okay.
And so that's been a significant improvement. And so like we definitely, we put privacy as the fundamental sort of issue that we're trying to solve, and the way that we're solving it prioritizes the user experience, which means that we have to think about how to improve performance. We have to think about how to make the platform more scalable, et cetera, if that makes sense.
But when you have to make a choice, the privacy will always be the fundamental stuffs.
Yes, yes, and I think that's what really makes our team stand out. I think our team is extremely talented, and they have been able to build and improve and iterate and create what we have today without any sacrifice to the privacy side, which is the core value proposition of what we're delivering. And so if there's anything that we can't compromise on, it's that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we can't think about how to innovate on other aspects.
Right.
And so that reduction in speed all the way down to 2 to 10 seconds, right? Like that, I think, is a significant indicator. We have our speed for that type of transaction is like 10x that of Zcash. And so like that is a really good indicator, really good benchmark, exactly how innovative we are and how, frankly, talented the team is.
Yeah, sticking to your core value is always important, and I think not all of the founders will realize that. Maybe, especially during a bull market, people will just go for what's making more money. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, fun part. Let's talk about the technology side a little bit.
Sure.
So we all know that Manta's technology stack is built upon zero-knowledge proofs, which you just mentioned. Can you tell us, like maybe in 1 or 2 sentences, what is zero-knowledge proof, right, to an average audience?
Yeah, so a zero-knowledge proof in the most basic form is proving that you have something, you own something, you did something without actually revealing any information about it. So one really basic example is I can prove to you that I can drive. You don't have to jump in a car with me to prove it, right?
Yep.
Like, I can just show you my driver's license. My driver's license is some type of proof that I can drive.
Right.
And the driver's license isn't a perfect example because the driver's license reveals my name and my age and all this stuff. But imagine this is a magical driver's license that has nothing on it. But if I show you it, you're like, oh, this guy can drive, right? But I didn't have to bring you into the car and prove it to you.
Got it.
Right? And so zero-knowledge proof is very much like that. You ask me, can I drive? I say, well, check this out. And you're like, okay, you can drive, right? And so a very simple, so that's how a zero-knowledge proof is conceptually. How does it work? It's software-based, it's algorithmic, and so what that means is that you don't need a specific type of hardware. You don't need a very powerful computer. You don't need a MacBook or a Windows, right?
Hardware agnostic.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a better way to describe it. So the classic example of how the algorithm works is the colorblind test. So I want to prove to you that I'm not colorblind. And so what you do is you put 2 balls behind your back. One is a red one, one's a blue one, and you shuffle them. And you bring them out. And I look at them and I say, okay, this one's the red one. And you're like, okay, lucky guess, 50-50 chance. You put it behind your back, you shuffle again, you bring them out. And I say, that one's the red one. You're like, okay, maybe he's just really lucky. You do it 10 times. And I pick 10 in a row. And you're like, wow, this guy is really, really lucky. Right? But then when you do it 1,000 times, then you're like, okay, the likelihood of this guy guessing 1,000 times in a row correctly is probably very small. And so you keep going until you reach a point where you say, okay.
You're talking about a statistical problem when it converges, like the convergency. Yes,
exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
So you understand, and I don't have to go any deeper. That's how ZKP works. Perfect. Yeah. So I'm trying to explain to a very rudimentary audience.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Obviously not to you, because you understand it all. But that's essentially how it works. Yeah.
Got it. And why is zero knowledge proof important to Manta Network?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. There's a lot of different approaches that you can take to solving the privacy issue, and there are different solutions. Different projects are taking different solutions, and even within the concept of zero knowledge proofs, there's like different implementations of it, right? There's like snarks, there's starks, etc. But for us, we wanted to focus on two things. One is hardware agnostic, and so there's certain solutions that you can't do if you want to be hardware agnostic. For example, some projects use trusted execution environments, but the trusted execution environments require you to use either Intel or AMD processors. And so we wanted to stay away from any specific hardware requirements because we want to be as decentralized as possible.
Right.
So we wanted to go algorithmic. So we decided, okay, zero knowledge proofs. Now, why snarks over like starks? We want to be able to control and design for optimal performance for each different use case. Okay. And from our perspective, using snarks is definitely a better way to do that. Starks is much more easy to deploy, but it's a little bit more general. And so you don't have that level of granularity and performance optimization that you can get from snarks. And so that's why we decided, one, ZKP, and two, specifically snarks.
So essentially, it's all built upon the purpose of you want different kind of projects to be able to use Manta Network.
Yes.
Because it has better adaptability.
Yes, we want different projects to use Manta Network in the most high performance way possible.
And they can customize it basically. Right?
Yes.
Got it. Yep. And does the privacy layer introduce more latency into the blockchain transactions?
Yes, it does. Because I think I mentioned this before. The zero knowledge proof is compute intensive, and so that means that there's a point in time where the zero knowledge proof needs to be generated, and so that generation process, however much time it takes, right? Once it's generated, then it needs to still be written to the blockchain, and so there's a latency from delivering the transaction onto the blockchain to the point it gets written on the block, and there's also a latency between like when the transaction happens and the zero knowledge proof is generated. Yep. Right now for Manta Network, the transaction happening and the zero knowledge proof being generated, that part takes around 2 to 5 seconds, and then whatever else is just blockchain.
So what's the percentage of the latency?
I'd say probably around like 20 to 30% of the total time.
Got it. Yeah. And what do you think will be an ideal way to optimize it? Like what percentage can you guys optimize it to?
I would say that right now, the 2 to 5 seconds is already like an extremely fast speed for the industry. I think from the innovation side, that's something that we're really proud of, that being able to accomplish that 2 to 5 seconds. What we're focusing on right now is less so the performance optimization on the speed side, and more so the performance optimization on making that speed achievable through other means. And what I mean by that is right now, in order to achieve that 2 to 5 seconds, what we need the user to use is a desktop signer, which means that it's a desktop application that helps them generate the zero knowledge proof as quickly as possible. But that's an extra step for the user. So we want to take away that desktop application and build it into the browser, or build it into the wallet, right? And so like our challenge right now is how do we take that 2 to 5 seconds and build it directly into the browser, or build it directly into the wallet.
So it's minimize the product.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess minimization is the hardest part for a lot of things.
Yes.
Is there any upcoming exciting features that you can disclose?
There's a lot of upcoming exciting features that I can't disclose.
Share something that you could right now.
Well, we talked about, the wallet UI and, adding Manta Network more to the wallet layer so that the users can toggle on and off privacy. That's something we can disclose. I'd say also we're looking at solutions to expand our ecosystem. And so, we definitely want to bring privacy to as many applications and use cases as possible. And so what that means is that we need to be able to build in additional functionality to adapt to the developer community so that the developers can leverage all of our privacy preservation functionality without having to do too much work on their end. These applications, they shouldn't need their own in-house cryptographers. They should just be able to use privacy essentially as a service. And so that's kind of what we're building for, but I can't get into too much detail of exactly how that's happening.
Okay. I guess once you release the product or even the beta version, we can have another talk.
Yes.
At that time, I want to ask all the technical details about it.
Okay.
Right? And
maybe we'll bring on Shumo.
Instead of you?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, and that will be the first time I met with him.
He's real.
Okay, good.
Very mysterious.
Yeah, I know. Before we wrap up our conversation, please share a fun fact about yourself.
Okay, this is a really fun fact because sometimes I tell people and they don't believe me. So my first job was in high school, and I was a scarecrow. So I lived next to a farm growing up in Tennessee, and this farm, grows a lot of corn. And every single fall, autumn season, they harvest the corn. But before they harvest the corn, they take a period of time where they just cut a giant maze into the corn, and so people run around the corn like in a maze. And so around like Halloween, the owners of the farm would hire high schoolers and stuff like myself back then.
To scare people.
Exactly. So I would dress up as a scarecrow, and I'd stand there and pretend like I'm a fake scarecrow, and then people come by really closely, and then I jump out at them, and I scare them. And I was like the scariest thing in the corn maze, and so I was really proud of that because like everywhere else, everyone was just like, oh, there's probably something that'll pop up. And so when you pop up at them, they're like, aha, whatever. But the scarecrow, they're just like, is that real? Are they? Yeah. So it's like, yeah. Anyway, that was my first job.
Did you enjoy it?
It was very fun. It was a great experience. I got promoted to be the scarecrow because before I was just like a werewolf hiding in the corn, and then when people come by, I would jump out at them as a werewolf, but no one would be scared, and I felt really stupid. But then when I was the scarecrow, everyone got scared, and I felt like, wow.
What makes them promote you?
Actually, it's because the actual scarecrow guy didn't show up that night. So I just took his outfit.
Got it. Okay, I like this part of
myself.
Okay. I like this part of the story. This is one of the funniest stories that I've ever heard. Thank you for sharing, Kenny.
Thank you.
And really, I want to thank you for coming to my channel today to talk about privacy on blockchain. I think
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a topic that people have a lot of misunderstanding, or even they haven't even think about, oh, maybe I should learn about the privacy on the blockchain. And I hope like our podcast gonna at least help somehow to inspire people to think about privacy on the blockchain a bit.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah. And over time, I want to see privacy gonna grow more impact.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah. Now let's say goodbye to our audience.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Bye.